Hello everyone, welcome to my next video of my Nullsec series, going over PvE ratting and kind of the overall encompassing guidelines that I use, going over kind of some of the fits that are available, what we can do for different ways to rat. There's not only just the passive ratting Ishtar cycle. If you are more interested in active ratting, that is a possibility. I'll go over some of those fits. I'll go over the fits that I use, which are the Ishtars and the various forms of these fits that work. Similarly, I'll work out some fits and some details for newer players who don't have quite the skills to run an Ishtar. What kind of ship you could potentially use, like a Vexor or something else of that nature, to also do some ratting out in Nullsec. On top of this, I'm going to be going over, the best practices to do while you are ratting and kind of what you should do to keep yourself alive while you're making your ISK, right? So let's get started. First things first, if you are here in Nullsec, ratting, it's one of the major ways to make ISK. It's extremely consistent. It can be anywhere from 40 to 80 mil an hour, or even more if you include your loot, and depending on how lucky you are, when you get escalations, you can get a lot more money than just that per hour. So it's a really useful thing to do. It's kind of the base level activity to make ISK out here, and I heavily recommend people give it a shot if they haven't already. It's kind of the second way that I've gone to increase my revenue and another opportunity to make money out here other than just exploration, which is what I used to do. So first things you can do, you can go to corporation. We have a collection of fits. It's in the bulletin. It says escalation fits, it says ratting fits. So you can click on that channel and it'll show you a bunch of different fits that are available depending on the type of ratting you want to do. So we have the Ishtar, which is kind of your passive ratting system. It's kind of like a fire and forget kind of system where you just warp into site, set it up, and then you can let it do its thing. Whereas other active ones, which technically complete the site quicker, and you technically make a little bit more ISK per hour than if you would do it with the Ishtar. You could use the Dominix, you could use the Armageddon Navy issue, Tempest fleets potentially. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. I know there's also a really cheap and effective way with a Praxis. So what it comes down to is really just understanding what the content of the site is, what you should be doing with your ship, and how you should be fitting it to maximize your survivability as well as your DPS. So in Providence, let's go over that stuff, right? In Providence, we are dealing with the Sancha pirates, and if you know those, resistance profiles that everyone has in their profile pages or whatever, for Sancha, they do primarily EM damage and some thermal damage, and they also take the most EM damage and thermal damage. So when you're building your ship to do ratting out here, and any ratting ship in general will be a heavily focused ship that will only be suitable for ratting and facing these types of enemies. So they are typically not ideal for PvP. If you do get caught, you are very easily going to get killed because your fit is set up so that you only specifically resist the pirates that you're ratting against, right? So because we are dealing with EM and thermal, I built my Ishtar to be EM and thermal resist, right? So I'll go through my Ishtar just as a base for this kind of stuff. So here's my fit. And you can see my resists over here. Let me simulate so that everything's on. And you can see how I have a nanobot accelerator. This is an active rep fit with an EM armor reinforcement because it's an EM profile for Sancha, so we need EM resists. And you can see on my actual defense, I have 73% EM, 73% thermal, which isn't the highest it could be, but because I'm also doing a dual rep setup, that is plenty of resistance to be able to tank and survive most sites under normal circumstances. And I'll tell you situations in which this ship won't survive, but for 95% of your purposes, this fit will work perfectly fine. It is something you can do with an Ishtar where you can just warp in at 30 kilometers out orbit and let your drones do their thing, and about 15 to 20 minutes later the site should be completed and you can continue on to the next one, right? But a key aspect to this kind of fit is, and this is kind of the same for any thing smaller than a battleship, you need to utilize the concept of speed tanking. So what is speed tanking? Speed tanking is essentially the concept in this game where, based on your ship's velocity and movement, as well as your signature radius, the smaller this value is and the faster you're moving, the lower the damage will be done to you based on the type of weapon being fired at you. So Sancha pirates and pretty much any rats in this game, they all kind of have the same profile where they use missile-like weapons. So they are a guaranteed hit on you generally, not always actually, but the point is, as you move faster and as you keep your signature radius low, and especially when you're moving in a transversal direction, like 90 degrees or perpendicular from the location that the enemy is shooting at you from, the damage that you would be dealt is significantly less than what you would be dealt if you were standing still or flying straight at them. So speed tanking is kind of what you need to do for any ship that is less than a battleship. It's what you do for the Ishtar. It's what you do for T3 cruisers and Escalations. It's what you do for Vexers, BNIs. It's the base concept of how to not confirm, but more so increase your chances drastically of surviving a site, is based on speed tanking. So you need to have an afterburner, at least, a proportional afterburner for a cruiser. It's a 10 millimeter MN, whatever, afterburner. And in this case, for my specific fit, I have dual reps. So I have 3 damage drone profiles. I have a increased nanobot accelerator for faster rep cycles. I have my EM armor reinforcer. Generally, I just do a reactive armor hardener no matter what, because if they're only hitting me with EM damage, it'll react to that and go up to 60% EM resist. If they're doing both EM and thermal damage, it'll cut down each of the others and make it 30% each. So it's a useful reactive armor hardener that can properly adjust to whatever damage type you're being dealt. And in my opinion, it's probably the best hardener in the game. You should always have it if you're armor tanking, no matter what. But anyway, other than that, you kind of want to set your ship up to be cap stable at all times with all your modules running, so you can see everything's active. Both my reps, my afterburner, even my auto targeting system, all of it's running, and I'm still cap stable with this much capacitor left. So you typically want to have a large cap battery of some form, an oversized cap battery that is typically what lets you have a cap stable system, and then any additional cap rechargers or capacitor bonuses and modules that you can on the ship, right? And for the sake of it, I have a drone link augmenter, a auto targeting system that will just automatically target all the enemies in the space, and then a navigation computer for my drones as well. As you can see, with this kind of ship and this kind of playstyle, the vast majority of my damage will be from my drones. So when you have skills that are sufficient enough, you can use just heavy drones, 5 Praetors. These are EM damage, so they are the ideal drone to use against Sancha. And because my skills with this ship, and in general, my skills for this kind of combat is extremely high, my drones will have no problem tracking and killing anything, even small frigates. For some people who have skills that are lower, you may need to put a tracking, an omnidirectional tracking link here instead of a navigation computer that will assist you in your drone's ability to track and hit smaller targets like the frigates that are in these sites. But essentially, this is the fit, and this is kind of the thing that can run the highest level content. This can run both havens and sanctums, which are the highest level ratting sites in these anomalies. Okay? So, what other fits are there? Well, again, depending on what you're trying to do, you can run this fit. You can see I have about 660 DPS with this fit. There's another variation that people have done that is fairly popular that is not dual rep, but is actually single rep. So the other fit that I have, let me open that one up, and the one I just brought out here from my other video the other day, is a single rep with 4 drone damage amplifiers and a reactive armor hardener, and everything else is essentially the same, right? Well, how does this work? How am I going to drop a single rep and still be able to survive if the dual rep is like what I needed to, right? Well, in this case, I'm not using just a normal 10 MN afterburner. I'm using an oversized afterburner, a 100 MN. And again, this is following the core concept of speed tanking. The faster you're going, and the more transversal speed you have against the enemies, the less damage that their damage profile weapons will do to you. So it's a very common tactic, and especially with things like Vexers, VNIs, some of the less skill-intensive ships, they will very often use an oversized afterburner fit to be able to do these kinds of sights, albeit much slower, but they can do havens and sanctums with an oversized afterburner fit. So this is something to keep in mind for you if you don't mind, the ISK efficiencies or inefficiencies, how much money you're making per hour. Oversized afterburners are a great option, but there's a lot of things you need to consider, and there's a lot of potential issues that this can bring you when it comes to trying to escape from combat situations, or if enemies are warping into your system and trying to catch and kill you. So I'll go into that stuff a little bit later. But let me just continue and go over some of the other stuff, other fits that I have, and kind of what else there is, right? So another very popular one, which I opened before, let me get back to it, is the Armageddon Navy issue. And I've never used that fit. I've never done anything other than the Ishtar. I'm very much an advocate for the fire and forget, and just kind of like keep eyes on what's going on while chilling, doing stuff on my other alt, or whatever it may be. But here is the fit for the Armageddon Navy issue. It's a much more active fit than the Ishtar. You definitely have to target, you definitely have to shoot, you have to load the right ammo. Obviously it's going to be Mjolnir, because Mjolnir is EM damage. And you can see it's comparable DPS, but because of the way in which that you are actively participating in this, you have a quicker chance to lock down targets, you have a quicker chance to shoot and kill them, versus the drones that I use, they very slowly, choose from one target to the next at their own volition. So these will typically have you go ahead and finish a site faster, but it comes at the cost of not having that downtime, or having to focus on, actually playing the game, which some people want to do that. So, but like I said, at the same time, you just kind of do the same core concepts here. Because it's a battleship, it doesn't need speed tanking. It has enough tank on its own. It's 76,000 effective hit points. So this thing doesn't need to speed tank. It can fully tank a site without any issue. And all they needed to do was, up their target painting for their missiles, have plenty of drone mods and effects to increase their drone damage, and overall just the combo of the two will be very effective as a way to do these sites. And it looks like in this specific fit they have a very, very good large armor repairer, and they also use a reactive armor hardener and some more tank. So this is a fit that I'm sure is very popular. It's very useful. It's also very expensive. So you want to be able to gauge whether or not you want to run something like this or something much cheaper that can do these sites, albeit at a much slower rate. Okay. So what other types of ships are there? There's all these, Dominics, there's a Hell if you want to do carrier routing, but I heavily, heavily, heavily recommend not doing that. This is a very interesting fit that I am just looking at for the first time, but hey, you can kind of do whatever you want in these kinds of things, right? PvE and ratting, you can kind of get creative and figure out what works best for you with your skills and how to tackle these havens and stuff. And as long as you make sure you follow the core concepts, which all of these ships generally do, you'll do fine. Like you can look again, I'll open this one back up. You can see again the resistances on this, at least 74, at least 73% EM resist and thermal resist. That is like the bare minimum for resistances. You can go even higher, and depending on the type of content you're doing, certain thresholds of resistances matter. So, in the future I may do a video on escalations, and I'll get more into what kind of resistance profile you need for that, and what the general, conditions, the offensive capabilities, the defensive capabilities, all that stuff. Everything has a set threshold for the minimum requirements in order to complete the content. So that's just something that can be a universal thing across no matter what fit you're making. Okay? So what if you're not like at the full level? What if you're not fully, ready to do havens? Your skills are not very high. You're a new player. You're not quite there yet, right? You haven't gotten the chance to get to the Ishtar. You're still working your way up there. Well, I have a few fits that are available that can help you with specific sites, not havens, but rally points. So this is a Vexor fit that I have here that can do rally points. So it's an active style fighting. You would use your antimatter, iridium, whatever it is on your railguns. It's all set tier 1 for new players, whoever is brand new and just getting into Nullsec, this is the fit for you. And it follows the same concepts. You can see it has 77% EM resist, 78 thermal. It is single rep in this case, and it's using a 10 MN afterburner. So the resistance profiles are pretty high because I'm affording that single rep. But I've done this with my skills. Generally, as a pre-note to all of this, you want to have your skills for these relevant ships to be at least level 4. If you're not at level 4, it's going to be much more difficult for you to be able to run these sites because the skills required for these are fairly tight. So if you don't have the skills required at least level 4, you may lose a ship or two. You may not have the proper resistance profiles. You may not have the proper repairing amount because your skills aren't up to par, right? So you want to make sure when you look at these ships and this info, you can go to the mastery and see where you're at, if you're at level 4, if you're at level 3, and essentially you need to be, for the most part, at least rank 4 in most of these skills. So, but anyway, this is the Vexor that I have available. I've tried and tested it. It works very well. It's, again, a slower kind of concept, but it will able to successfully complete a rally point without any issues, and it's only 22 million. It's very, very, very cheap. So this is a very useful thing if you don't mind losing your ship and you're learning how to live out here and you don't want to risk losing really expensive stuff. This can do rally points pretty well from the start. As you work your way up and get your skills improved and move on from tier 1 to tier 2, you can go into the tier 2 version I have. There's also the VNI that can be a useful type of Radar. It's definitely a more effective Vexor, so this thing can work. And to the degree that you are able to adjust these Vexors based on your skills, you can even do havens with these. Like I said, as long as you do it properly and you use a 100 MN afterburner, you can run havens and you can run sanctums and these end game anomalies, but you need to do it in the correct way. Okay, so if you have any further questions on like the fits, what you should do, if you're curious about whether or not your fit should work for the content that we have out here, you are more than welcome to send me a mail or find me in game, send me a link of your fit, and ask me what I think, where you could improve it, where it could be adjusted, and kind of like help you get a sense of if it's ready for a haven, or you can work your way up from a rally point to a haven with it, see where it has limits, see where it doesn't. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to go and undock. I realize right now that there is a newt in our home base, only a few systems away, in a Svipple. I'm doing this on purpose, so hopefully he doesn't actually kill me, but using my knowledge of keeping myself alive, he really shouldn't. So I'm going to go out with my dual rep and a single, not oversized afterburner, and show you the basic concept of ratting with an Ishtar, okay? And obviously, the cardinal rule before any of this, make sure you're in fleet. If you're not in fleet and something happens and no one can warp to you, you're shit out of luck. You're going to get killed. There's no potential that your allies can find you and warp to you quickly if they jump into system. Currently, I'm the only one in system, so I have a relatively safe bet. But you have to keep eyes on what's going on in Intel and realize that there's someone actively hunting people 2 systems away. So I can use this as a good opportunity to demonstrate what you should do when a neutral comes into the system, or when you see a neutral 1 system away from you. So I'm just going to warp to any random haven, and with this specific fit, I warp to within 30. And at this point, I'll already start up my reppers, and you kind of, with dual rep, want to stagger them. So you see, the moment that it hits halfway at the top, I start the second one. And you do this because it'll alternate the cycles and consistently rep you over and over on a more frequent basis than if you turn them on at the same time. There's no real theoretical difference, it's just it'll keep your armor tank up high in the case that something like a dreadnought spawns, and you may potentially survive easier if your armor is high, right? So this is one of 2 types of havens. It's the, I guess the pirate hub or the abandoned dock one. Each one has kind of their own type of spawn structure. They have different ratios of, what's the word? They have different like mechanics or I guess chances of spawning escalations based on the type, but you can tell that this one is the pirate docking station because it warps in, nothing happens for a while, and then you'll see in a minute here, or a second here in local, it says some pirates are coming through. Yeah, see right there. And then they show up. So once they show up, I'm going to turn on my afterburner, I'm going to turn on my auto-targeting system, I'm going to wait for them to start targeting me, and then I'm going to release my drones. So they started targeting me, I'm releasing my drones, and now as they continue to target me, my drones are going to auto-attack, right? So the reason why I did it that way is because if you have your drones out and they spawn in while your drones are out, there is a potential chance that they will, instead of targeting you, target your drones. So in order to mitigate that and potentially prevent your drones from getting shot at or killed, it's always good to let them aggro you first and then send your drones out to fight them. Okay? But you can see here, I'm moving in a transversal direction 30 kilometers away and just orbiting. I'm just orbiting, have everything on. At this point, if I really wanted to and was reckless, I could just get up and leave for 20 minutes. And theoretically, I will have this site done. Now, does that mean that I should? Absolutely not. There is a thing with these sites that you need to keep in mind and consider, especially with how this type of tanking works. As it states, speed tanking requires you to have speed. So these sites, these havens, even I think rally points, sanctums, all of these sites and these kinds of rats, and this is universal for any pirate, not just Sancha, but this kind of high-level content will have not only battleships that do higher DPS, it'll have battle cruisers that can do tracking disruptor effects on you, it'll have frigates that can do tracking disruptor effects on you, but it'll also have frigates that can do web and scram on you. They can warp disrupt you, they can web you, and prevent you from being able to warp out to safety if you need to. So, what happens when you do it in this fashion with an Ishtar is you send out your drones, they will automatically target each ship accordingly, but they always target from highest threat to lowest. So first they're going to kill all the battleships on the field, and then they're going to kill the battle cruisers, and then they're going to kill the cruisers, and then finally they'll get to the frigates. That is theoretically an okay way to do it, but there come certain points, and depending on the site you're doing, it can cost you your ship if you let that happen that way. So this is one of 2 types of havens that you can come to. It's the Pirate Gate Haven. It'll be this asteroid with a pirate gate in the middle. The other one is a very elongated asteroid cluster that has rats already spawned in it and 2 sentry towers. That one can kill you if you don't pay attention. So what often happens is as you're doing this, as you're orbiting, as you're letting your ship do its thing, because your drones target the highest priority ships, they'll kill off all the battleships, they'll kill off all the battle cruisers, etc., etc. And it comes to a certain wave in which you have a bunch of frigates left over when the next spawn shows up. And if those frigates, on a random chance, it's very, very often that it happens, sometimes you get lucky and they don't do this, but they may come into a situation where you have 3 or so frigates from the previous wave sitting on you, webbing you, or spamming you even. But if all 3 are webbing you, and the new wave spawns in, you're moving so slow because of the webs that you cannot tank that damage. So if you're not paying attention, and those 3 frigates are webbing you, you're going to lose your ship. Guaranteed. It's happened to me at least 2 times. It's happened to many people simply because they're just not paying enough attention to what's going on their screen when you do this kind of ratting style. So it's one of the major aspects of kind of AFK ratting that this setup with the Ishtar does that you need to keep an eye on, make sure you're not falling for, and ultimately preventing by telling your drones at certain points to focus fire the scram frigates and the web frigates. Usually they're the same type of frigate. But despite the fact, the universal rule when you're doing this stuff, even though this is technically a good way to AFK farm, sit at your desk, keep your screen open, watch what's going on screen and pay attention. Don't just like watch a YouTube video, not look at your screen for 30 minutes and then come back and see, oh shit, my ship is dead because I got webbed by those 3 frigates. Right? So that's like one of the #1 rules when you're doing this kind of thing. You also want to pay attention and see what's going on in Intel. Like this guy's still he's in C1 now. He's probably going to roam at some point to TXJ. I got to be prepared, right? So what do you do in that situation? You don't want to be like how I am right now and say, it'll be fine. You know, he's in 2 systems away. He's not going to come here. I don't need to worry. I can keep doing my thing. That is almost always what you say before they warp into the system, find you really quick, and tackle you before you can get out and kill you. So when you see these kinds of neutrals on Intel 1 or 2 systems away from you, the first rule of thumb that you need to do, and the first thing that you should understand about what happens when you warp, if you watch my other video, I explained it, is you need to turn off your prop mod. So in my fitting, if you see what's going on, I'm actively running my prop mod. My mass is 15.6 million or 1,000 tons or whatever, and I have an 8.25 second align time. So if I were to decide to warp to station right now, it would take 8.25 seconds. That is almost 4 times the amount of time an enemy needs to find you and catch you. They can do it within 2 seconds, usually within 5. So 8.2 seconds is way too long. So what you want to do is you want to focus on the location that you're going to warp to. In this case, I'll select the station, and I'm going to align, and then I'm going to turn off my afterburner. Okay? While that's happening, I'm going to recall my drones. And this entire time, the enemy is 1 system away. At any moment, they could be jumping into local, and they could be trying to find and kill me. So all I'm doing is aligning. Once my drones reach me, I'm going to go ahead and warp to station. So they are in my bay, warp away. And because I already was aligned and my afterburner was off, at any moment there, I was able to warp away to safety. I could have waited and the enemy could have jumped into system, he could have jumped into my grid, he could have warped to my location, he could have even tried to come in target and tackle me. But the moment I clicked warp, I warped away instantly because I was aligned to my location, I was moving at 100% speed, and my drones were back in my hole safely, right? So the general rule of thumb that you should always do when you're ratting, keep an eye on intel. If an enemy shows up 1 system away, pre-align. Turn off your afterburner, turn off your prop mod, pre-align, recall your drones. You can take all the time you need to wait for your drones to return, but if the enemy warps onto grid and your drones aren't back yet, you need to sacrifice them and warp away. You don't want to lose your ship. It's okay if you lose 5 drones. It's not okay if you lose your 300 mil or 500 mil or whatever amount of ISK ship, right? And this is especially important for battleships and other larger ships that don't need to speed tank. You should always be pre-aligned to a safe when you're ratting, no matter what. You can move at 10% of your speed, 50 meters per second, whatever the rate is, but you always want to be pre-aligned because that saves you precious seconds in the time it takes to get to warp speed. Okay? So I'm going to go back to that Sancha Haven and just continue what I'm doing. And I'll demonstrate it one more time just for posterity, right? So I just land on the grid at 30, orbit at 30, turn on my prop mod right away, turn on my auto targeter, and let it do its thing, right? So orbit 30, prop mod on, target on. I'm just going to let my drones out. And then I can let it do its thing. And this is one way to do a haven. You can do this at a sanctum. You can do this at almost any site in Null. It's a very passive way to do it, to make ISK. You know, it's boring to some people. To me, it's pretty boring as well. But what's the benefit? What's the purpose really, right? Well, on top of doing these sites, if you were to go, and there's very useful links. In fact, let me see if I can pull it up and show you. There's very useful links on the internet, usually by Eve University. And I'm just looking up combat anomalies in Eve, and it'll have a page that it shows you. Let me try to get this window up here. Here we go. Sorry, 1 second, and boom. So that is the site that I recommend you all look at if you're ever curious about the kind of content you're going to get yourself into, what you can expect, what kind of rats there are, what they have the capability of doing. It even goes into detail on how much DPS you can expect, how much alpha damage you can expect, how much tank you should have. There's a lot of really useful information on the Eve University website. They have the most information for every single mechanic of Eve in the game. This is something that I used a lot when I was first learning about what type of anomalies I should do. This is where I go to check every single wormhole site that I ever look at, so I can get an understanding of what I'm getting myself into with my ship and how to appropriately do that content without losing my ship. So this is absolutely the website you should go to. It is extremely useful. Here is the breakdown of the table that shows the combat anomalies for Sancha's nation, and it shows you the escalation type. So what is an escalation? An escalation is a kind of what it sounds like. It's a further development of that combat anomaly into something that is more unique and lucrative. So some of these sites that you can find, and again, it's based on the difficulty. All of these sites up to the Sancha Den are found in HiSec. Anything from the Refuge all the way down to the Forlorn Hub is found in Lowsec. And for Nullsec, anything from the Hidden Den all the way down to the Sanctums and soon to be Forsaken Sanctums are in Nullsec. And some of these, like Havens, Sanctums, are only in Nullsec. So there's a certain content that is, restricted to certain types of sites. And what does it mean with these escalations? Well, these are what makes you really the big money. So you can see Sanchas, they have 10 out of 10. Your rally points have 6 out of 10. Your Forsaken rally points have 8 out of 10s. These kinds of escalations, if I click on them and show you, will have a whole lot more information on a unique event that you go to. You warp to this location. It is a certain threat assessment. This one is 10 out of 10. This is the one that I farm as much as I can when I receive them. And you go through the content to potentially receive up to, well, at the minimum, 140 million ISK from the drops here. But sometimes you can get way more than that. You get faction loot. You get all sorts of extra things that have a chance to drop, and at some point I've had up to 700 million in a single run because of the loot that was garnered from it. But it's not an easy thing. You need to have a proper fit. You need to have a very expensive fit. So what you can often do is sell these to other people who can run them. So if you look in bulletins, let me go back. Yep. If you look in bulletins, you can go all the way down to the very bottom, and you can see selling escalations, how much each cost. So 6 out of 10s from your rally points can cost 50 million for people. People are willing to buy them for 50 million. 8 out of 10s, 80 million. Basically, whatever the number here is on the left, that equates to the cost in ISK by adding a 0. So 80 million for 8s, 6 to 70 million for a 7, 50 million for a 6, and 100 million for a 10. And these are all kind of negotiable, right? Depending on the location that you get those escalations in, it may be more lucrative, it may be less lucrative, but generally you want to sell those if you don't have the skills to do them, and it's a great way to earn a lot more extra income on top of the already 40 to 80 million ISK per hour that you're getting from just ratting, right? So that's the reason why you do these sites, that you hope that you get an escalation, a chance, you sell them or you do them, and you can make a lot of big money that way, right? But anyway, you can see here, I wasn't really paying attention. I'm in a situation, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 frigates all circling around me, one of which is webbing me. Now, again, like I said, I got lucky. Sometimes all of them will web you. Sometimes 2 of them will web you, 1 of them will scram you. Sometimes they don't do anything at all. So you can see I'm being scrammed by 1 and my speed is really heavily reduced. So the thing I'm going to do at this point is target that specific one with my drones and kill it as quickly as I can. Because any of these frigates are the most dangerous part of these sites. If they come close to you, if they all decide to web you and you're not paying attention, they are going to kill you. They are going to slow you down enough where the enemy ships will start doing way more damage to you and you will get killed. Okay? So out of habit, out of necessity, what I tend to do is anytime there's a buildup of these frigates, I just kill them all at once and then continue to let my drones do their thing. Okay? So I'm going to kill all the ones around me, and then once they're dead, let it do its thing. And that's all you really need to do to prevent your ship from really getting killed in any fashion that is due to sheer negligence. Just kill the frigates first when you see them, and you're set, you're golden. You'll finish the site, no problem. But there's one other way that you can lose your ship to PvE content. Not only do you get escalations from these sites, but you get different types of escalations. There's new types of escalations called the fleet staging grounds. There's the dead escalations that I just showed you, the 10 out of 10s. You also have a chance in the site to have rare faction spawns. You can have a commander battleship, a commander or a large commander wreck worthy battleship spawn in, a true Sancha, and he can drop faction loot for you. You can have also dreadnoughts and titans, potentially. They can spawn in on the last wave of these sites. So something else to keep in mind and something else to look out for is at the very last wave, what type of wave you're getting. Because if you're not paying attention, if you're not really, focusing, and all of a sudden you get a dreadnought, if you're not quick enough, that thing's going to one-shot you. So you need to be aware of what's going on. You need to be consistently looking at your screen. Despite how passive this kind of playstyle is, you should really just be busy on your alts in one screen while checking on this every few minutes in the other screen, or doing other things that you could be doing with your character like PI, industry, talking to friends, typing up whatever you may need to type up for corporation like I do. But you should always have an eye on what's going on, because the moment those things spawn in and you're not quick enough, you lose your ship. So those are the real 2 ways that you can lose your ship in a PvE only scenario. It's number 1, the frigates slowing you down enough for everything to kill you, and number 2, a dreadnought spawning and you're not reacting quick enough to leave the site. Okay? The final way you can be killed, again, is by neutrals. If they warp into system, you're not paying attention to what's going on in intel, you're not paying attention to what's going on in your local because you're just not looking at your screen, yeah, they're going to find you, they're going to warp to you, and you probably won't be able to warp out, and they'll kill you. So that is the essential basics of doing PvE ratting here. Alright? And I'm going to let this go. What people sometimes do, and what I heavily recommend you do as well, is to get an even more amount of ISK per hour, it is good to loot all of these ships. So on average, any of these havens that you'd run, when you do receive all of the loot off of their wrecks, gives you anything from 15 to 25 million extra ISK in loot. And that can add up, right? You do 4 havens, and that's around anywhere from 80 to 100 million extra ISK. So it's very, very incentivized. People all the time will say, hey, warp in, put down your MTU at first, orbit it, and let it suck up all the wrecks while you're killing them in real time. I don't recommend that. That is how some people do it. You're welcome to do it that way if you so choose. It helps you clear the site quicker once the site is actually completed. But you're going to want to potentially change how you think about that based on how it affects your ability to escape from enemies. So not only if you place the MTU down and orbit it at like 2,000 or 5,000 or whatever, it's reducing your speed because you're orbiting in a smaller, tighter radius, but it kind of can change your focus. And this has happened to me once or twice in the past where I see a new in-system and I'm like, shit, I have my MTU out. I need to go scoop that up real quick before I warp out. That is the biggest mistake you could make. Typically, the time it takes for you to head towards your MTU, scoop it up, and then try to align out and warp out, they'll warp to you and catch you. That's happened to me in the past. I'm sure it's happened to many people in the past in their situations where they're thinking, hey, let me just quickly grab my MTU and get out of here, and that bites them in the ass. So not only is that kind of mindset harmful, but it gives the enemies a really easy thing to kill that can cost you quite a bit. It's 10 to 15 million per MTU, right? So basically you're just placing something down that if an enemy decides to, they can jump into system, warp to your anomaly, see that, target it, and kill it. And it's a free kill on their kill board, it's a free loss on your kill board, and they just it's something that they can easily decide to kill because you are warping out of the anomaly without it, right? So why do I put it down at the end? Well, I put it down at the end because now it becomes a non-warpable location, right? All of these locations are here in the combat anomaly section that anyone can freely warp to those. So put down my MTU now, some random nuke could come into system and warp right away to that, right? But if I complete the site, this will disappear from the anomaly hub, right? It won't be listed here. It'll be in nowhere, in the middle of dead space. And the only way that enemies could then find it is if they deliberately combat scan it down, which happens a lot, but it's an extra step of inconvenience for your enemies, and so long as you pick up your MTUs within a timely manner by doing this, you should never lose your MTUs. So I go through the habit of waiting until the site is completely done, placing down my MTU, and then bookmarking it and saving it to come back to in about an hour. Okay? And that's about it. This is a very passive method. There's more active ways to do this. You can use different types of ships. You can use a praxis. You can do all sorts of stuff to kind of do the ratting that you need. But remember, you just need to have a certain amount of DPS. Obviously, the higher the DPS, the better. But you need to have a certain amount of resist. So you can see here, because they are very heavily focusing EM on me, my EM resist for my reactive armor hardener is up to 87%. So that's really, really great resist. That's extremely high. I'm taking no damage from these guys, and I can easily active rep with 2 reppers on this site. Now I'm going to recall and demonstrate the other type, the oversized, and what to do with that one. Okay? So I'm going to align, turn off my prop mod, let my drones come back. And once they are back in, which they are, I'm going to go ahead and set to warp. And you can see how I'm aligning, and I'm not quite instantaneously warping. That's due to the effects of the afterburner. So oftentimes when you're trying to do any of this stuff, it's good to wait and turn off your afterburner and let it cycle off first before you start to align and before you start to warp out, because the additional effects of the afterburner on your fit, you can see my navigation, I lost an extra 5,000 tons because my afterburner is not on anymore, right? That affects your agility. That makes you slower. It makes your align time slower. So while that's still cycling, even if it's turning off in the next cycle, it's affecting your ship's statistics. It's affecting your ship's capabilities, and it'll make you align slower. It'll make you warp slower, even if you're trying to turn it off, right? So it's always good to turn off the mod, let it cycle off completely, and then start to align and warp away. Okay. So I'm just going to demonstrate what to do with the oversized prop type of these ships. So the Vexor's same concept for anything that has an oversized afterburner, which oversized is 100 mn. You have to do things slightly differently, and I'll demonstrate exactly why you have to do things differently. But with my dual rep 10 mn afterburner, I was orbiting at about 30 kilometers, right? Fairly close. If some enemy were to warp in at 0, they'd be around 30 kilometers away from me. If they're particularly quick, they can, MWD prop mod on and warp, like move as quickly as they can to me and try to catch me, right? With these ships, you shouldn't really sit at 30. You should sit quite a bit of ways. So I'm going to go back to that haven, and instead of warping to 30, I'm going to warp to like 70. Let's say 70. Some people warp to 60, some people warp to 100, some people warp to some distance that is significantly farther away than what you would normally do with a regular size 10 mn afterburner. Okay? And the reason is because this thing affects your agility and your overall maximum velocity in a very different way than a undersized or a properly sized propulsion module. So I'm 70 kilometers away. I'm going to orbit this at 70, and I'm going to turn on my prop mod, turn on my hardener, and turn on my single rep. And again, this ship is meant to be cap stable, so with all my modules on. So you can see here, it's ramping up my speed very, very slowly. It takes a long time. It also takes a very wide arc. You can see I'm burning away linearly, and you saw I took about 900 damage because I was not going transversal. My speed wasn't fully up to date. I wasn't quite in the proper positioning to start to speed tank properly with this oversized prop mod. So this is a really big deal for ensuring that your ship survives on the movement towards your orbit, but once you do get into orbit with this thing, you take almost no damage because you're going transversal. It's going to work its way slowly, very slowly, up to 900 meters per second. And because of that speed, and because of the transversal, and because of my signature, the damage profile will drastically drop down, and I'll take close to zero damage. And that's why I can support only a single armor rep, because of that. And otherwise, it's the exact same thing. But you can see here, there's a situation here that I need to pay attention to. My drones are getting targeted. These guys have stopped targeting me, and now they're targeting my drones. This is a very common thing that can happen. If you're not paying attention, this is a very easy way to lose your drones. So what do? Well, obviously, the first thing you want to do is recall them. Recall them, get them into your dock, and I'm going to turn off my prop mod. Now this is something that I do. It's kind of a, it's a ritual per se, but sometimes some people think that this has to do with the threat meters being reset. Every once in a while when you warp out of and warp back into a site, sometimes the threat meter resets and they don't consider your ship as much of a threat as your drones. So what I tend to do sometimes in these situations is I will warp to a safe or warp somewhere and kind of reset my profile, quote unquote, by undocking or ejecting from my ship and re-entering it. So I'm going to go ahead and eject. Make sure that you're able to do this. Sometimes you have a fit that if you were to eject, it might blow up on itself or something. So make sure you can do that before you are able to, and then I just jump back into it. take a few seconds. There's no solid science on this. This is just kind of speculation, but some people have said that this will adjust your threat so that they focus you more than your drones, and it's some sort of aspect of the game that sometimes the PvE or rat AI will accidentally have the wrong profile and target your drones instead of you. Another thing you could do is just warp to a station and dock up, close out your game too. You can log out and log back in and see if that changes things. Generally, I've gotten the best results by doing what I just did. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a second shot. I want to turn everything back on. And yeah, so you do this at a much farther distance away. You can do it anywhere from 40 to 70 to 100 kilometers away, so long as your augment, like your drone range, allows you to. And this has the benefit of being 60 to 70 kilometers away from the 0 point. So when people warp to this location, if a nuke were to come into system and warp to 0 or warp to whatever they think is appropriate, they're going to warp in on grid and see me 50 to 70 kilometers away from them. So that's quite a bit farther away than if I were at 30, right? But what's the downside of this? What is the catch? Well, here you'll see in my fitting. Remember how my other prop was only 8 seconds? When I have an oversized afterburner on, it's 32 seconds. That is an astronomical amount of time. The effect of an oversized prop mod, one that is much larger than your ship's type, makes it the slowest to warp out of all situations. So this is where you can really easily get killed if you're not really following the true proper order of what you're trying to do. So in these oversized afterburner fits, you're at a much farther distance, but it takes you so long to warp out that they can easily find you, catch up to you, and kill you in the time that you're still trying to warp away. So here is where the order of operations truly matter. In this case, let's say a neutral was 1 system away or about to jump in. First thing I do, no matter what, turn off my prop mod. Get rid of that bonus. Get rid of that level of, slow, low agileness, your navigation. You can see I went from 32 down to 5 seconds. So the moment that you are trying to get out of this site, moment that you see that you are potentially running into a situation where someone is going to come into the system and kill you, turn off your prop mod and pre-align to the structure. Okay? And then you recall your drones. Again, you're 70 kilometers away, so your drones are a little bit farther away than typical. So it'll take them a little bit longer to get to you, but as long as you turn off your prop mod and you pre-align, no matter what, even if the enemy warps in, the moment you get your drones, you can warp away to safety. And it'll be an instantaneous warp. Okay? So that is what you really need to keep in mind with oversized prop. It heavily influences your warp time. You have to turn it off before you align. You have to turn it off before you try to warp out. You have to just get rid of that negative agility modifier and reduce your warp time down from 30 fucking seconds back to the 5 seconds that it should take, because if you don't, you are going to get caught and killed. Alright, so if there's any other information that I left out, feel free to let me know in the comments or send me a message in game. I'll do a supplemental video. One final thing, just to wrap this up, when you are doing these kinds of sites, I will typically, like I said, finish the site, drop my MTU somewhere nearby, and then I'll just go ahead and bookmark it. So what I'll do is I'll right click launch for self. Okay, let me go to my safe and demonstrate this. So I'm going to warp to a safe. Let's pretend that my safe is a site that I just completed, right? It'll be delisted from the combat anomalies section. You'll have a bunch of recs there that are available to be looted. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my MTU, bookmark it, and be ready to come back for it later on once it's collected all the loot, right? And then from there, when all the loot is consolidated into one location, that is where I take my alt, or you can take out your salvager, whatever it may be, a salvager, a destroyer, a catalyst, your your porpoise or whatever the fuck the Noctis, that thing. You can take that out and do all the salvaging because you saved a bookmark for later on. So let's say here is a site, here is all the recs. I'm going to go ahead and launch my MTU, launch for self. It's going to start setting up. Once it does, I'm going to right click it, save as location, and then you can save it as whatever you want. Just make sure you know where you're saving it. In this case, I have a shared folder for my alt because my alt is what salvages. So I'm going to put it here. I'm going to call it whatever individual modifier I know to indicate that this is a site that's separate from all the other ones. So I do my Poyo and then 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on however many sites that I clear and put down MTUs. I just change the number, and that is my indicator of which site I am able to go to and differentiate between as I salvage and loot each site. So I submit that, and then I'll warp to the next haven. I'll choose the next one, warp there, do that one, finish that anomaly, put down another MTU, and that's why I have 3 of them, right? Put down another MTU, bookmark that MTU, label it Poil 2, find another haven, warp to that one, clear it out, put down the other haven or the other MTU. Once that one's done, bookmark that Poil 3. By the time I do all that stuff, my Poil 1 bookmark, or my first MTU, is way beyond finished, and I can pick up that MTU, go to another haven, use that MTU I just picked up to start looting that one once I finish that one. So it's a consistent cycle that I do over and over with the MTUs, and it's, in my opinion, a more efficient way to do things. Okay? So yeah, that's ratting. Again, most important things, pay attention to your screen. Don't just not pay attention for 10 minutes and wonder why your ship is gone, or why, there's an enemy in local and you don't understand why your ship didn't warp out in time. You got to understand what the situation is. Pre-align when necessary. If they're one system away from you, pre-align. Just start aligning away. You can wait and see if they actually jump into system, but you want to make sure that if they do jump into system, you're ready to warp away. So you want to pre-align to a safe or a station, recall your drones, and if they do happen to jump into system and your drones are back in your bay, go ahead and warp. If they somehow manage to find you and warp to your grid and your drones aren't fully back in your drone bay, too bad for those guys, warp away anyway. Alright? Any further questions, any other things, again, any advice on fits for ratting out here, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know if you have any other specific information or comments or questions, and I'd be happy to make another video on other aspects of PvE. But in general, this is the easiest, most brainless, and one of the most consistent ways to make ISK out in Nullsec. So thank you very much. Hope to see you next time.